grid shutdown attack. Klaus Schwab is predicting, or is it planning, mayhem. The World Economic Forum is always so full of uplifting and encouraging news. This year, the folks at the Davos event predicted that in 2 years, a major cyber attack will occur that will shut down major portions of the world's power grid. Oh, such nice things these folks are planning for us. Here is a short video clip that Klaus Schwab released on this exact topic.
To the frightening scenario of a comprehensive cyber attack, which would bring to a complete halt to the power supply, transportation, hospital services, our society as a whole. The COVID-19 crisis would be seen in this respect as a small disturbance in comparison to a major cyber attack.
He says it will make the pandemic seem like a blip on the screen. Why is he bringing this up? Does he have something like this planned? Like an evil villain from a 1960s Bond movie, Schwab lays out the future that they're envisioning. No power, no food, no heat, no water, no hospitals, etc. And his solution, of course, is to give them the power via a great reset of everything, and then they'll protect us. Yeah, right. If you think this is unlikely, you are wrong. It's already happening. There were 163 attacks on the U.S. power grid in 2022. Some involved friends of mine in Moore County, North Carolina, a fellow Christian author, Joe Leonard, and 45,000 others were out of power for about 4 days in frigid weather when terrorists shot up 2 electric substations. 163 attacks in 1 year. Yet you hear very little about this from the media on this topic, and less from federal law enforcement. Of course, Schwab and his cronies planned something much grander. There's also, of course, the issue of this recent hot air balloon that China released. Some are saying in the government that it could be a prelude to an EMP attack over our electrical system. That it would carry a small load nuclear weapon that could destroy electronic systems. And of course, Schwab and China are very tight. Now, this is something that the globalists have been thinking about for a long time. And here is what World Economic Forum Managing Director Jeremy Jurgens said at Davos, quote, "The most striking finding that we've found is that 93% of cyber leaders and 86% of cyber business leaders believe that the geopolitical instability makes a catastrophic cyber event likely in the next 2 years," end of quote. One country that recently saw a massive cyber attack is Albania. Maybe you don't even know about this. Edi Rama, Albania's prime minister, says that if cybercrime was a state, it would be the 3rd largest global economy after the US and China. That means that crime coming in the future could truly be catastrophic. Rama cited the poor global response to COVID-19 and said a cyber attack would be much more substantial and dangerous, and we can't afford that type of foul-up. Notice how they linked this to COVID. I found that very interesting. In fact, the World Economic Forum says something about this, quote, "A cyber attack with COVID-like characteristics," catch that, "would spread faster and further than any biological virus. A cyber attack with COVID-like characteristics? What are those characteristics? Let's watch."
The COVID-19 pandemic has shaken our economies and societies to the core and shown us how vulnerable we are to biological threats. In the digital world, similar risks are being overlooked right now. A cyber attack with COVID-like characteristics would spread faster and further than any biological virus. Its reproductive rate would be around 10 times greater than what we've experienced with the coronavirus. To give you an idea, one of the fastest worms in history, the 2003 Slammer sapphire worm, doubled in size approximately every 8.5 seconds, infecting over 75,000 devices in 10 minutes and almost 11 million devices in 24 hours. Fortunately, at least until now, cyber attacks have not impacted our health the way pandemics have, but the economic damages, and therefore the impact they have had on our daily lives, have been equal and sometimes even greater. You see, the only way to stop the exponential propagation of a COVID-like cyber threat is to fully disconnect the millions of vulnerable devices from one another and from the internet. All of this in a matter of days. A single day without the internet would cost our economies more than $50 billion, and that's before considering the economic and societal damages should these devices be linked to essential services such as transport or healthcare. As the digital realm increasingly merges with our physical world, the ripple effects of cyber attacks on our safety just keep on expanding at a faster pace than what we're preparing for. COVID-19 was known as an anticipated risk. So is the digital equivalent. Let's be better prepared for that one. The time is now.
And with a well-designed digital virus, no one could say it jumped from an animal to a man either, could they? Everyone would know it was an intentional international event. Now, of course, they're going to blame the cybercrime elements. But who will be commanding those elements? Who will be behind this and this 163 U.S. grid attacks last year? They won't talk about the real criminals, will they? Those who hire the cyber criminals to do the crime. Brings us back to good old Klaus Schwab, who was hinting at all of this in his video. He sees the vast potential for it to cause chaos on a global scale. So the question is, does the World Economic Forum see that chaos is a bad thing, or do they view it as a good thing from their perspective? The World Economic Forum are truly interested in the betterment of mankind, then certainly it would be a bad thing. If they have other agendas in mind, like a technocratic takeover of the world, well then chaos and the shutdown of the grid is a very, very, very good thing for them. So you have to answer for yourself. What evidence says their agenda is good or bad? From my perspective, the technocrats and billionaires have a corrupt, tyrannical agenda where we will own nothing and they will be happy. This channel believes the unelected globalists will take advantage of every and each crisis to exert their influence on politicians, business leaders, civil society. It doesn't matter if the crisis has to do with cybersecurity, climate change, poverty, global pandemic. Every solution the WEF puts forward calls for public-private collaborations, a close merger of corporation and state. In other words, a technocratic takeover of the world by the billionaires. And they're going to say all of this is for our protection, of course. That is why Klaus Schwab now calls these things a polycrisis. Multiple crises happening at the same time. That's why they blend COVID with grid shutdowns. It's all part of their polycrisis. But are they causing these crises? Because if they are, there's one crisis that trumps all the others in their minds. If you think about it, a power grid shutdown for a month or so is perfect from their perspective. They require power for their technocratic systems. In fact, they require more power than they are able to access right now. Blockchain and digital currency require enormous amounts of power. All their surveillance systems require lots of power too. Where are they going to get all this power to run their surveillance systems? From you and from me, of course. If we don't use the power we use now, but are restricted to little or no power, they can have it all. So remember, they not only want to take our assets away in a great reset, they want to take away our power grid as well, to spend it on activities like surveillance that keep us in line and digital currency that force us to be compliant. They will say that the restriction of our future power will be for the good of the planet. Climate change. It's a lie. They will use more than we ever did.
It's like them flying their jets into Davos. They could care less about the planet. They'll say it's for the good of all to be equitable. Again, a lie. They're going to hog it all. And to prevent future power failures. Again, a lie. It's likely they will cause future power failures. We can't say that for sure, but it is very likely in my mind. Just like flipping off a switch. Then they can turn it back on at some point with very little damage to their systems. Just damage to everyday humans in our lives. But they can take things back to the way they were so that they can hog all the power in the future. How would a global grid shutdown impact the world, and why would this be something that could tip the world into a great reset? The first aspect is fear. Videos like Schwab's that we just saw are meant to generate fear because out of fear comes control. People will surrender their freedom to be safe. This is what Klaus and his billionaire buddies are counting on. The surrender of human rights because of fear. Going back to Klaus's video, he recounts a lot of what's going to happen in a power shutdown. Listen to what he says again.
Our reliance on digital services and infrastructure has exponentially increased due to the unprecedented connectivity which we have established now. We all know, but still pay insufficient attention to the frightening scenario of a comprehensive cyber attack, which would bring to a complete halt to the power supply, transportation, hospital services, our society as a whole. The COVID-19 crisis would be seen in this respect as a small disturbance in comparison to a major cyber attack. Our existing fragmented global architecture is not fit anymore for purpose in the 21st century. It's high time for a great reset. We need a great reset that will shape a much more resilient system for the post-corona era.
Transportation shuts down. No one drives anywhere. Businesses close, including groceries. Hospitals close. Sick people don't get better. Our society as a whole shuts down, which means no heating or cooling, no food, no water, a complete breakdown in society and police protection. And of course, in his opinion, it's high time for a great reset, where they are in charge and come in to rescue us like a knight on a white horse to restore our lives back to normal. People have discussed EMP attacks in the past. You've probably seen videos about this. A power grid shutdown would be similar, but with several big differences which they view as advantages. An EMP fries the electronics never to be used again. A cyber attack is just like shutting off a switch, so they can use or not use whatever technology they want when they turn the switch back on, which will be when they're in complete control. Because imagine all the so-called restrictions that they will say they have to put in place to stop this from ever happening again. Yeah, right. All they have to do is not cause another event. It's a perfect storm, though, from their point of view. There are several things a person needs to overcome in a power grid failure. Let's talk about that for a second. The first one is Jesus. Fear is the number one enemy in a grid failure. Jesus is the Prince of Peace and the solution. People all around you in a failure are going to be freaking out. Christians and non-Christians, when everything about their lives change in a moment. It's the perfect time to be at peace with ourselves and point people to the Prince of Peace. It may be the greatest potential time of evangelism the world will ever know. Think about that. Think about how needy your neighbors will be at that time. We need to point them to Jesus at that moment. Absolutely nothing else is more important. None of us may survive, but eternal life will be there. We need to be ready for that moment and to act on it if it happens, because that is our calling at that time. Let me say that again. We need to be ready for something like this and then act on it when it happens. Second, there are all the physical needs, water being the most important. Do you have a well on your property with a hand pump? Or do you have filtration straws to disinfect polluted water and make it drinkable? You need a renewable water source. You need food for yourself and your neighbors as well. Jesus said there will be famines. Are you ready? A grid shutdown might be the source of those famines Jesus was talking about. Have you thought about that? Third, you need an emergency source of heat. A wood-burning stove is ideal because the fuel source, wood, is all around us and completely usable in many factors. You have to have a stove, though, because you can't just burn a fire inside your house. There's carbon monoxide issues with that, and of course you could burn your house down. But most people are not prepared for these things. So a grid shutdown would be the source of great social unrest. Hungry and thirsty people will do almost anything to survive. Those who have will be attacked by those who have not. Everyone needs to be mentally and emotionally prepared for that sort of event. So what are you going to do? Exodus 22:2 and 3 gives us a clear reference to self-defense under the Old Covenant. If a thief is found breaking in, and he is struck so that he dies, there shall be no guilt for his bloodshed. So it appears, at least from the Old Testament, that it's okay to defend yourself. In the New Testament, Jesus said if someone asks for your cloak, give them your tunic as well. And in Matthew, he said, he who lives by the sword dies by the sword. So Scripture isn't 100% clear on the issue of self-defense. I highly suggest you study this and come to an understanding as a family as to what you will do when this happens to you, because it is likely in the very near future something like this may happen. This is a future Klaus Schwab and the billionaires expect for you. They've made a video about it. If they turn the switch off and then turn it back on, millions will be dead and the rest will be left compliant. As we said, it is the perfect storm from their point of view. And of course, Jesus warned us about such occurrences and what we should be doing about it. Click right here to learn more about his detailed instructions for the last days before his return. They will surprise you. Till then, this is Nelson, and I'll see you there.